Welcome to Raising the Bar podcast,
sponsored by the Ashmore Law Firm.
We're your hosts and siblings,
Gary Ashmore
and Lori Ashmore Peters.
Subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
So I am so excited about our guest today on Raising the Bar podcast, sponsored by the Ashmore Law Firm.
Yep.
Lori Ashmore Peters and
Gary Ashmore.
brother, sister, although we say that I think every single time.
It's okay, we got to keep reminding people.
We do. We
That's
definitely
right.
do.
Go ahead.
So we have a special guest, Dr. Priya Patel. And how we met Priya Patel, and I had surgery this week. So number one, you're lucky that I'm here.
Right, and I appreciate that.
And it's all his
That's right.
fault, hounding me. Are you coming? Are you coming? We got to get her on here. We got to get her on here.
right.
So I'm here.
Right, thank you.
All right.
She's an amazing guest. This
She
gonna
is.
be
Oh my
so
God,
much
this is
fun.
so worth it.
Right. Well, she's a celebrity.
She is.
So let me say they're both celebrities. I'm out of my league here. I'm being taken over by the women. But yeah, so go ahead. We met her.
So Modern Luxury magazine.
Right.
Dynamic Women.
Okay.
We were page mates.
Page mates?
Is that what you call it? Page mates.
Page mates.
We are neighbors, and so that's
Right.
how we met. And it was instant. It was instant. As soon as we met, it's like, oh, my kindred soul. I love this.
Of course.
But she went on to other things, Paper City magazine,
Yes.
and that was a recent article.
Yeah, I think it was maybe in the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
So it was really nice.
So wait, a couple other accolades though,
Yes,
right? D
yes.
Magazine's Best Doctor
Ooh,
in 2024 and Living Magazine's Best Regenerative Medicine Practice of 2024, which I guess we're going to talk about regenerative medicine.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's just, what an honor. This is an honor. This is so much fun.
Thank you guys.
It is. So here's
much
what I'm
fun.
going to say before we get into exactly what she does. This episode is for women. Sorry, men. But I think it's also, do you see men at all? Or is
I
it
actually do.
You do? Okay.
Oh,
I don't
good.
advertise it.
I have some questions for her. We're going to meet after this.
But some of my patients will ask if I'll see their spouse or their significant other. And so
there we go.
I do see some.
Okay. So
I just don't
for men-
advertise it.
men
Our
as
name
well.
is Feminology MD. So I clearly
Right.
didn't anticipate that when I started
Hey.
the practice, but it has evolved and I actually enjoy it.
There we go. So men as well, but then I will also say for you men that are looking for something great for your female counterpart, look her up, because I know if anyone would want to give me a visit and book me a visit to go see Dr. Patel, I'm all in.
Right. Because,
Hint, hint.
Right. Oh, hint, hint.
Hint,
Oh, got
hint.
it. Got it. Okay.
I mean, if a guy wanted to say, "Hey, I got you a gift,"
like for
and-
Valentine's Day.
Oh, absolutely.
Valentine's Day's coming up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if my spouse was still with us, I would say, "Hey, Rick, come
Right.
on,
Give me
hint,
a free
hint."
consult
oh,
with
yeah.
Dr. Patel.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Because she's all about women's health, and that's
Yes.
huge. And again, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Okay, so you were with a thriving OB-GYN practice.
Yeah, so I was at just sort of a traditional OBGYN practice. I delivered out of Presbyterian. And, there was 5 of us and loved my practice. Had wonderful partners and really no complaints. But I just sort of always felt like as I was, working and just watching women, it just felt like there was sort of this void in women's health when, either you completed the childbearing years or between that, or especially, our late 30s, 40s and beyond, that oftentimes, I'd have patients come in that had a host of issues, right, that they were really dealing with and need addressed. And, I was supposed to sort of figure all of this out in this 15-minute time slot that insurance will cover.
Right.
And,
right.
and they have a host of complaints. And I almost found myself trying to give them quick fixes because I needed, they're like, I have these 8 issues. I feel terrible. So I'm trying to solve the problem, but there's really not enough time, right, to solve the problem. And so I sort of just started to see that more and more. And I just felt like there has to be a better way to do this. And I loved OB and I loved delivering babies. So it was hard to sort of give that up. But now, being on the other side of it 2 years in, while I miss it, I am so grateful I did, because I think it's really allowed me to sort of cater to this other phase of life that I think, unfortunately, in women's healthcare has maybe sometimes been underaddressed or even undervalued. I think oftentimes, there's a lot of emphasis in our healthcare system on pregnancy, and even postpartum is probably not well addressed.
Right.
But, as pregnancy and all of those things are fairly well addressed, right? While you're pregnant, you typically see your doctor in a 9-month period at least 9 or 10 times. But after that, you're supposed to see your doctor once a year, right? And insurance will typically cover a 30-minute visit right? Once a year if you're lucky. And that's that. And so it's sort of just expected that you're just supposed to coast and it's all fine. But I think we forget that actually women go through a lot of changes in their 40s and their 50s, and they are far from coasting. And so that's really where my practice, that was the root. And that's sort of how it was born.
Okay. And so the name of it's Feminology MD.
Feminology MD, yes.
Okay. How'd you come up with that name?
Well,
Is there a story?
ironically, not really.
Okay.
I thought a lot about names because I feel like a name is really reflective of your practice and what you want it to be. And a lot of doctors, maybe sometimes because it's just easier or there's name recognition or whatever, a lot of times their name is in the practice
Right.
or things like that, or it's just generic to the specialty, right? So it would be Patel Women's Health or, some sort of generic name to identify that, we take care of women and that it's kind of gynecology in some, or hormones,
Right.
Anti-aging. These words are sort of thrown in as buzzwords. And there's so many practices like that. And so I sort of wanted to figure out how to convey that we take care of women, which ironically now we've also added men. So
Right,
perhaps I was not thinking bigger picture at the time. But, I wanted to sort of convey that we take care of women, but without actually using women in the name, because I
Right.
felt like there's so many medical practices that just stick women in there. And so feminology, feminine obviously is women, and ology is the study of.
Okay.
And
love
so I was like, well, what is really, what is my goal? What am I trying to do? And I was like, well, we're really trying to sort of study women and what they go through and try to help improve that process, right? And improve that long-term trajectory for each woman, right?
Right,
Whatever
right.
that might look like for them, and just help them to achieve their goals. So that's sort of how it, came about. And then I, did a quick Google search to see if there was anything similar. And then the MD I added on because feminology alone is a little confusing, right? The MD at least makes you think, okay, so there's something medical about this, right? Like, is this a weed pop up?
Right,
Like, what?
right.
I have no idea.
Right.
Is this a sex? Like, what are they doing? Is this a sex shop? Who knows? So I was like, the MD at least makes it sound remotely medical. But actually, if you Google search, it's interesting because some 80 years ago, someone wrote, I should have brought it today, but somebody actually wrote a book called Feminology.
Oh.
And
Wow.
it's called Feminology, and it's like the study of womankind and how to live your life, et cetera, et cetera. And it's fascinating because this was written, I think, 80 years ago, in the early mid 1900s. And it talks about how women should live their life. And you would think, being so old, that there would be a lot of traditional thoughts, but it's actually pretty forward thinking.
Wow.
And it's it's a little bit more progressive, and it talks about taking care of yourself and not just living for someone else and all of these things. And so then I don't know, that kind of made me like it a little bit more. I was like, that's amazing, right? 80 plus years ago, someone was forward thinking enough to sort of say because at that time it was very much a male dominated society, right? Women were kind of here to
Have babies.
Yeah,
Right.
it's definitely not about hear me roar.
No, correct.
And so I loved that that was a little bit of the sentiment in the book. So then I was like, okay, I think I like it.
That's cool.
And
That's
see,
good.
no offense to your
male
mankind,
population.
yes, your male
please. Go
population.
ahead.
But as a female, there are a lot of things that are going on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
Very much so.
whether it's mind, body, soul. It's all of it. So just to have someone that really sees it all, listens to it all, and treats every aspect of it.
We
and
try,
not-
at least.
Well, you try, but it's not just, take this prescription medication and it should help you. There's 1,800 on the market, so if this one doesn't work, then we'll try
another one. Yeah.
Right. So
And
it's just nice to
these
see.
are aspects that men not only don't understand, but will never understand.
Oh, you
Just so we're
couldn't
clear about
handle
that.
it.
That's probably true. That's probably true. That's correct.
Y'all could not handle it.
Right.
It's like last night I was talking to my husband and I was, kind of telling this, and this, and this. And he was like, there's just so much happening in your head.
I know, right?
He
That's
was
right.
like, maybe you're stressed out because there's just too much happening in there.
It's like you have no idea.
That is
Oh
hilarious.
my gosh, that is so
great.
true though. Oh my
And
gosh.
I thought about it. At first I was like, well, of course there's a lot happening in my head. I'm doing a lot. And then I thought about it a little bit later, and I was like, maybe maybe
There
that's
is.
the problem.
That's the problem.
There's just not as much happening in his head.
That is, again,
That is
but
great.
he's winning.
that you are absolutely right. Okay, but so give us a little bit about your background.
Right.
You know, did you grow up thinking this is what you were going to do?
Yeah, so I grew up in Dallas. My mother is actually an OBGYN. In our immediate family, it's kind of funny, but there's actually 4 other OBGYNs. My mom's sister,
Okay.
my mom's daughter, so not my mom's daughter, that would be
That'd be
me.
you.
My aunt's daughter,
Okay.
so my cousin, and then my aunt's daughter-in-law.
Oh my goodness.
My gosh.
It's also an OB. So there's
great.
now 5 of us. And that's just really, the daughter-in-law, that's just random,
That's
right?
very
Her son
random.
picked her.
Marries and
Which,
right.
really
Happens
makes
to be.
you wonder, like, truly marrying your mom, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
like literally
yeah.
picked an OB. But, so, I've obviously I was always exposed to it from a really young age. And ironically, my mom, oftentimes in Indian families, there's a little bit of a push to be a doctor and, kind
Right.
of follow that traditional route. And my mom, I would say, was pretty progressive in that she was a little bit more like, do what you want. She definitely was sort of like, you need to be able to support yourself. So if you want to be a starving artist, no, you do that.
Do that.
But just, or whatever, but understand that you have to be able to support yourself. You have to pay your bills. And you also want to like what you do at the end of the day. And so I think, but she was never like, be a doctor or be this or be that. She was like, you need to choose what it is that you want to get up every day and do that will bring you joy. And so I think as I grew up, I just sort of watched her and I could see that what she did every day really brought her joy. And I think that, so that sort of laid the foundation for me ultimately wanting to go into medicine. In medical school, I really thought I wanted to do something different and be original because we had 4 other OBs already in the
Right.
family at this point. So I was like, I'm going to do something different. So I thought I might go into general surgery or just go a different route. But then as I sort of did the OBGYN rotation and saw the joy in taking care of women and really that whole aspect of healthcare, inevitably I was sort of drawn to it. And I think that for me then, at the end of the day, I was like, well, this whole idea of originality, turns out it's not for me.
Right.
And I really loved the idea of getting to take care of women. But particularly what I liked about GYN, really gynecology, is that I think it's amazing to have the opportunity to sort of follow women through time. Right? As an OBGYN, you have the potential to deliver someone's kids and then maybe take care of them for the next 30 years. Right? I think there's something really special about that. And so that's what drew me to it.
Okay.
And so that's really kind of how I ended up where I am. And then I grew up in Dallas. I went to college at the University of Southern California.
We went to Hockaday, right?
Yes,
Here
I
local,
went to Hockaday.
High School.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
In Dallas, loved it. My daughter's actually in 3rd grade there now.
Okay.
And then went to University of Southern California for undergraduate, did my medical training at LSU, and then kind of moved back home when my husband and I both completed our training. And then that's when I sort of joined a more traditional practice and loved it. And I was there for about 6 years. And then that's sort of where I started to get the idea. And then during that process, I actually went back kind of right before I left my practice and started the new one. I went back and got training in functional medicine. So I got board
Okay.
certified in functional medicine because I felt like if I was going to open a more kind of holistic approach to women's health, that I needed a little bit more of that sort of holistic approach to the body.
Right.
And our medical system, love it, but it does teach a little bit more fragmented care, right? It's a little bit more like, the OBGYNs are taught about those issues. And if you have a GI problem, go to the GI.
Yeah.
If you have a heart problem, go to the heart, go to the cardiologist. It's all very divided.
Right.
And so I felt like, and there's a lot of value in that, right? There is a time and a place for all of those things. But I also wanted to be able to just understand the body as a whole, to really, sort of be able to treat the body as one unit and not say you need to go to these 6 other doctors. Now, I still refer plenty,
Right.
right? Because there is a need, and I am not specialized in those areas when someone needs that additional higher level of care. But I think that functional medicine background has allowed me to sort of treat the body as a unified unit and really understand, if you're having pain, like what are the root causes? If you are having headaches, like it might actually be related to your gut, right? They are not
Right.
necessarily separate entities. So that, I think, sort of rounded out my understanding of the human body.
So you say functional medicine. Is that defined a certain way, or what?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because
people
depending
aren't
on
gonna
who
know
you
what-
ask,
right.
functional medicine has a different definition.
Right.
And I think it's functional medicine is interesting because it really runs the gamut, right? And so some people sort of view it as alternative medicine, and some very traditional doctors are going to call it quackery,
Right,
Right.
okay.
And then there is, I think, more conservative versions of functional medicine, which is just a little bit more of root cause analysis.
Okay.
Right. Instead of just saying you have acne, let me just treat the acne with an antibiotic. It's a little bit more of a deeper evaluation, right? You're getting acne, you're getting headaches. Why do we think those things are happening, right? Let's really look at your lifestyle. Let's look at your exercise. Let's look at your sleep habits. Let's look at your, diet. Let's look at
right.
all of those things. Let's look at family history. Let's look at personal history. What other medical issues do you have going on, to really put it together, as opposed to just putting Band-Aids on things. Sometimes you have to put a Band-Aid on things, right?
Right.
If you're hemorrhaging, sometimes you need a Band-Aid.
Right.
But it's about not always putting Band-Aids, right? And it's about trying to sometimes heal from the inside out. And sometimes that means you put a Band-Aid on something while you need to.
Right.
Right. But you're also working on solving the root cause. So to me, that is what functional medicine is.
Right,
Right.
okay.
It's a little bit more of just looking at the big picture, and not treating the body as individual systems,
Okay.
but really as just one unified unit.
So people will know holistic, because then there's some folks that take a holistic approach.
Right.
But is this considered strictly holistic, or is
It's
it
not
in between?
It's
Right.
not.
It's not.
And so
okay.
I would say I kind of fall in this sort of interesting middle category,
Right.
because I am traditionally trained, right? I'm a very
right.
traditionally trained medical doctor. That is my upbringing. I am very science and data driven. Like
Right.
that has been drilled into my brain for 20 plus years. But then I think what's a little bit interesting is then I sort of went back and got this functional medicine training that also, it can be data driven, right? And I think sometimes
Right.
where functional medicine gets a little bit of that bad reputation is that anything you can take to an extreme, right? And sometimes you can probably do things that maybe aren't as data driven, right? And are a little bit more, I don't want to say made up, right? But are a little bit more hypothetical. And so I think that's where functional medicine really has a wide spectrum of what that looks like, because you can have functional medicine that's more rooted in science and a little bit more that's rooted in ideas and thoughts, which isn't wrong, right?
Right.
But I think to each their own.
Right.
So I think for me, I really what I do in incorporating functional medicine is I sort of look for where the data is, right? And I try to look at the body as a whole, and look a little bit more holistically at hormones and things like that. That in
Right.
traditional medicine is a little bit less looked at, right? It's just we've understood it less traditionally. And I would say in the last decade, there's been that's shifted a lot more, and we understand a lot more than we used to. And there's a desire to learn more.
Right.
Whereas historically, I think it was just sort of like, this is the way it is, and no one really addressed it. Nobody wanted to put research dollars into it. It just wasn't
That's right.
addressed. And in the last 5 years, sort of menopause, anti-aging, all of these things have sort of become like buzzwords and hot items. And so I think it's a really fun time to be in the space, because people are finally talking about it.
Yeah, that's great.
But
People are
to
talking
answer,
about it, yeah.
But to answer your question, I think I'm sort of this blend, or I'd like to be a blend of sort of traditional and also a little bit of this more holistic root cause, but with science behind it.
Right.
Well, right, and people are talking about it, and they want to know, okay, don't just throw the prescriptions at
Right.
me. Tell me what I can do naturally. to
Like
help
what is
with
happening?
What is
Like,
happening?
what can I change to actually address this problem? Right.
So with your, with the long history of OBGYNs in your family and taking, I'm sure, the more traditional approach, what did they think when you told them that this is what you wanted to do?
It's funny. No, they were all like, okay. And I think, which is funny.
nonchalant.
I was
Right.
a little bit, I wondered like what my mom would think, because it's just a little bit different. And she was a little bit like, it's going to be a lot of work. Kind of like what she said to me the first time, right? She's like, OBGYN is a lot of work. I love what I do, so I don't mind, getting up at 3 a.m. and doing it night after night. But it's a lot of work, So she basically said the same thing. She was like, it's going to be a lot of work. So if you want to do this, then you just need to be clear that you know what that's going to look like, and that you want to do it and you're passionate about it. I was like, I think I am. She's like, all right. good luck.
for it.
How can I help?
Right. Well,
so I'm lucky in that way. Like I had a lot of support.
which is good. I mean, because that's a lot of how dad was with us is
Right.
it's just, number one, life is too short. You got to wake up every day and be happy with what you do in life. If you're not
100%.
happy, change it.
Yeah. And it's funny because, people, even patients or just even in friends, a lot of times the impetus for change is dissatisfaction, right? We're unhappy with what we do or we don't like it. And so that's why we're motivated to make a change. I actually loved what I do, which I think is what made it hard, is that there was no real reason to change other than I sort of had this idea and felt like, I feel like this could be done better.
Right.
But there was no real issue.
Right.
So really what finally forced me to do it was that my contract was ending.
Okay.
And so I either had to renegotiate, right, and sign a new one, or get off the pot, as
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
so then I really sort of thought about it with myself, and I was like, and I had a really busy practice, but I was like, I'm investing more time and energy into this. And if in my mind I keep talking about doing something else, well, I'm not getting any younger.
Right.
So there's never going to be a right time. I need to just do it. And so I sort of took the leap. But I'm also very lucky because I had a support system. I have we have a secondary income, and so I had the luxury of being able to sort of take that leap.
Right.
So I'm grateful for that.
Well, I mean, as a female, I'm glad you took the leap.
Right.
Well, I mean, because it just opens up the door in so many ways. Because I'm thinking to myself, oh man, yeah, I have about 8 issues going on.
Right.
I know who I'm
You have a few
scheduling
more
an
this
appointment.
week.
I have
This
a few
is a
more
bad
this
week
week.
for you.
It is.
Post surgery. This is not a great week.
It is a bad week. But yeah, I mean, it's like just to have someone that you can go talk to say, this is everything I'm feeling. These are all of my symptoms, I guess. Fix me, or let's just approach each one, whether it's traditional, whether it's functional, whether it's holistic, but
Let's talk about it.
Let's just talk about
Well,
it.
it's funny, when I was creating the practice model initially, I said, okay, I want to start with sort of a new patient consult that's an hour long.
Right.
And I remember initially thinking, like, what am I going to talk to what am I going to talk about with someone for an hour? Like, it seemed like, because I was just used to quick visits,
Yes.
right? And trying
Right.
and just moving through. So I was like, an hour seems like so much time. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And now, an hour goes by, I'm like, whew, that was rushed.
Yeah.
Like there's
That's
so
right.
many more things we need to talk about. So it's funny how your perspective starts to shift.
It is.
But you're right. When you really have 6, 7, 8, even if you have 2 things to chat through.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes if you're really delving into it and getting into the nitty gritty and you're not just trying to throw quick things at it, it takes time.
No, it
And
does.
an hour I've now learned is far from enough time.
Right.
But we got to start somewhere.
It takes time, and it's funny because I know, people are like, oh, you went to a new doctor. How did you like them? And I'm like, man, they spent so much time with me. It was great. And it's like, well, wow, so much time was about 20 minutes.
Right. That's right.
But I had their undivided attention for 20 whole minutes.
Unfortunately, in our healthcare system, 20 minutes feels amazing.
It felt
Right? If
amazing.
someone is actually talking to you and looking at you for 20 minutes,
Yes.
Right.
it feels remarkable.
It does.
Which probably isn't where we should be, but it's where we are.
it's what's expected.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the expectation.
And it's just the model that's been created. But
Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh! All right,
amazing.
so my gift to you is going to be scheduling an
Oh,
appointment
skip the with her as well.
with Dr. Patel.
Valentine's,
You're
reciprocal
welcome.
Valentine's Day gift.
But again, brother, sister.
Right, of course. So I think that really is what sets you apart from, you're right, either you go to an OB-GYN or you go to a holistic doctor or you go to, but you've combined all of that. And I think that's what really sets you apart and makes you someone that really wants to come talk to somebody and evaluate what some of the root issues are and not just, here, take this pill, it'll fix it. Because that's what a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, and I think that was my goal.
Right.
I'm working on it every day, but that really was my feeling. I was like, in healthcare, in our current model, you often have to pick, right? Someone's
Right.
like, are you choosing a traditional doctor? Are you choosing a more functional, holistic approach? And it's one or the other, right? And people are sort of grouped. Oh, I go see traditional doctors, or I have a functional doctor, right? And it's sort of these very it's looked at as these very 2 different schools of thought and paths. And my feeling is probably both have a lot of merit and value, but why not sort of take the best of both worlds and combine it? Because why do you have to choose one or the other?
Right.
Right? Why not sort of take the merit-based practices from both, because there's probably value in both. That's why they exist. And then why not be able to combine that? Because I feel like you should get a better outcome, right?
Right.
If you sort of take the best of what we got, but you don't limit yourself to any one niche, so to speak.
Right, which is amazing. Okay, so who is your youngest patient? What age?
I mean, I've seen as young as 15,
Okay.
16.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a ton of younger patients anymore, but I mean, quite a few. It's often, oftentimes, 15-year-olds not seeking out, is not Googling and seeking, but oftentimes what happens is either their mom will have seen me as a patient or the mom will have a friend and, they reach out and they're like, my daughter is dealing with this. And, I find that oftentimes moms are they're not dying. We're not dying to just put our kids on medicine.
Right.
We're sort of like, if she's dealing with a lot of things at 14 or 15, there's a little bit of a desire to actually figure out, what's happening. How can we best help her? So I'll see, some in the younger teenagers. And I would say my oldest patient has been probably 93.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Loved her.
Okay.
She was sharp as they come.
We've got a 97-year-old mother and can't get her to go to a freaking doctor to save our lives. So maybe
she self-diagnoses.
She self-medicates.
That age.
Bless her heart.
But maybe she's winning, right? Maybe she's figured it out.
I know. Oh, yeah.
At 97, she's doing something right.
Doing something right.
She's doing something right.
That is
hilarious.
fantastic.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, you go.
All right. So here's what I want to do. I want to take a quick break. We're definitely going to come back and continue our discussions with Dr. Priya Patel. And I have some additional questions I want to ask her about. So be right back.
Oh, boy.
Hey everyone, Ashley Massey, your global real estate advisor and author of Fast Track Agent. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast today. I hope that you're enjoying all of the stories. If you or anyone you know is looking to buy or sell in the DFW area, I would love to have a conversation and see if I might be the right fit. I'm not only licensed in Texas, but I'm also licensed up in Oklahoma, and I have properties happening in Cozumel, Mexico, if there's any investors out there. So if you have questions about what's going on in the market or the DFW area, feel free to reach out.
Welcome back to our amazing episode of Raising the Bar podcast, again sponsored by the Ashmore Law Firm. Lori and I have been speaking with the amazing Dr. Priya Patel. So what I wanted to get into now that we've taken a quick break and everybody's refreshed is tell us a little bit how people can find you. Well, let's start with there. How do people find you?
Yeah, so pretty simple. We are in Preston Center.
Okay.
So our address is 8215 Westchester Drive. We're kind of down the street from Hop Dottie, across from Montlake Cut. So it's really pretty accessible right in that intersection. We are in the first floor, kind of right when you walk in.
Okay.
And how you can find us, so our website is www.feminologymd.com.
Okay.
Or Instagram, our handle is FeminologyMD.
Okay.
So those are probably the easiest ways.
Perfect. All right.
And then I guess our phone number, 469-242-6292 is our office number. So
Okay.
you can always call that as well.
So if you're ever looking for her, check her out. Now, if people search Dr. Priya Patel, are you going to come up?
Yeah, it'll come
You'll
up. Like my name and Feminology MD will come up.
Right,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. All right, so you all know how to get a hold of her, so please, you definitely want to talk with her. So when someone calls the office and they want to make an appointment with you, what's that step look like?
Yeah, so usually our front desk is really great about sort of going through pricing, because usually there's a lot of questions. It's a different model. People are kind of trying to understand, as they should, like what the heck, what it is, right? Like, what am I doing?
Right.
And a lot of times, people are trying to understand, like, can she become my gynecologist? The answer is yes. Or what does that look like, right? Is she just talking to me? Can she also do my yearly pelvic exam? Like, what all can I do? And my goal was really to make it simple for people. And so the answer is yes. Like, I can kind of do it all if if you need that. And I have some patients that have their their gynecologists that they've had for 30 years that they still want to keep them. And they'll also see me, right?
Okay.
For additional hormone stuff or whatever they have going on. So it really goes both ways. Some people are like, I'd like to simplify my life, so I'm just going to start seeing you, right? So we really can tailor it and make it what someone needs it to be. But my Jasmine is usually who answers the phone, and she will typically sort of walk through our pricing. She'll usually she will sort of actually do a quick intake about what their goals are. Right. Like, how did you hear about us? What are you looking to, what are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? Why do you want to come see us? Just so she has a little bit of an understanding of what their needs are. And then typically she'll walk through pricing. Usually how our typical model works is that we'll usually start with a 1-hour consult.
Okay.
Some places will do labs and then they'll bring patients in for an initial consult to kind of go over the labs and talk with them at once. What I found, unfortunately, it requires 2 visits, so
Right.
the cost does go up, which I realize. But what I found is that if I have that initial time to talk with someone, I can really get into things a little bit more. And I often find that there's different labs that I want to do. There's things that I need to
Right.
add on. There's things that they don't need. And so I feel that I get a much more tailored approach, which, I know is not how some other practices do it. But I think for me, I think it works better. And even though, unfortunately, it does cause there to be a little bit more upfront cost, I think it's worth it.
Right,
Because
okay.
I think on the back end, the patient ends up getting a lot more out of it. Because if they do labs, sort of preset labs that we think they should get, and then they come in and I'm talking to them and we're really getting into the nitty gritty, then oftentimes you're like, well, actually, I need these 8 other things.
Right.
Right? I didn't know about your family history of X, or I didn't know that you had X diagnosis or cancer at the age of 12. Right? So it completely changes the outlook. And so then you're sort of right back where you started. So I much prefer to sort of have that initial hour to get to know them, understand their health history, understand their family history, sort of understand where they are in their life, right? What doesn't feel as great as they want it to be, what their goals are, and what they're hoping to sort of achieve, right, by coming to see me. And so then I can sort of better tailor that workup to them. And also because we incorporate functional medicine, sometimes it's not just traditional tests,
Right.
But not everybody needs functional medicine tests, right? Some people do, some people don't. And so that gives me the time to really figure out what they need. And then also
Okay.
price has to be factored in, right? So then we can talk through those things as well and really figure out if someone's, needs to be a little bit more thoughtful about cost and budget, then we can say, okay, this is what I think is number 1, and this is where I would spend your money first to get the information. And then maybe 2 and 3 we table for a later date, depending on how things go.
Right.
Right. But it sort of allows us to have that conversation and really customize it to them, as opposed to sort of have a cookie cutter approach.
Of course.
So I've sort of decided that I think it's worth it that way because I think they get a better result at the end of the day. So they'll typically do that 1-hour consult. Then same day we'll decide whatever additional testing needs to get done, and then blood work. All of those things will get done in the office. If there's additional functional medicine, some testing, sometimes that has to be timed around their menstrual periods, things like
right.
that. So sometimes it has to be done around a certain day. Sometimes we'll do GI and stool testing and things like that. So that's
Right.
something they take home and do in the luxury of their own home.
Of course.
And then those tests will get sent off. But the idea really is that first day after that visit, they should sort of leave with a full plan in place for what that workup should be.
Okay.
And then we typically will schedule an additional 1-hour consult 1 to 2 weeks later, sometimes 3 weeks, depending on what testing is done, to then sit down and walk through all of it. And then at that follow-up, we've already chatted, right? We know what the goals are. We know what the issues are. So now it's just about how do we solve them. And so then we'll usually walk through all of the testing step by step. I really take a lot of time to go through labs because I think, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody else, but oftentimes when labs are normal, right? Or we sort of perceive them to be normal because nothing is in the out of range
Right.
marker.
Right.
I would often, and I think unfortunately doctors were pressed for time traditionally and often will say, yep, all the labs are normal, everything looks good. But the person just told you they have 6 problems and they feel like crap.
Yeah.
Right? But you're like, well, all your labs look good, so it must be you.
Right.
Right?
That's
I don't know
right.
what to tell you. Good luck. And so the idea is that I really want to try to educate my patients a little bit about what the labs are showing. Right? So even the normals, we walk through them. And I'm
Right.
like, this is the normal, but even though you're in the normal, you are high normal or you're low normal.
That's right.
And this is why I think this is affecting X. Right? But that's different for each person because symptoms are different for each person.
Right.
And so we really take a lot of time to sort of walk through labs one by one by one. And then, a lot of times as we walk through that and sort of break it down in more detail, you'll start to find things that pop up. Well, look, these 4 things weren't perfect. I wonder if that's causing, if that's contributing to some of that fatigue. And then round that out with the fact that you're not sleeping well, and then maybe we're having these GI disturbances, it all starts to make sense.
Right.
Right? So you start to find that things that seem seemingly very disconnected are actually quite connected. But it takes time, right,
Okay,
to figure
yes.
that out. And so that's really what the goal of the second visit is. And then at the end of that, they really should have a plan in place for what we're doing. Right? So we identified these 7 things that aren't perfect. Sometimes it's 2 things. It just depends. And then this is what we're going to do about it. Right? Sometimes it's hormones. Sometimes it's other approaches. it's whatever the issue is, right? And so we'll just address it in different ways. Sometimes it's just dietary and lifestyle changes plus some other things. Varies person to person. But they should have a plan in place, right? That's kind of their homework. That is what you are doing. And so they leave with that, and then everybody needs different follow-up, right? Some people, if it's just, some people will just see me and they're like, I feel pretty good, right? I'm 45, I'm 48, I'm 50. I actually don't feel terrible. I hear I'm about to feel terrible, or some of my friends feel terrible, but I don't know, I feel okay, right? But they're like, I want to make sure I stay this way. So I'm trying to kind of stay ahead of it, right? And then I see the flip side where I may have a 40-year-old or a 45-year-old that's like, I feel awful. And I remember a time when I didn't feel like this. So I know it's not just me. I saw my OBGYN or I saw my primary care and they did some basic labs and said everything looks fine. But I'm telling you, I'm not fine, right? I see a distinct change. And it's fascinating because when you chat with people, they can often localize it, right, to a very specific period of time. They're like, I felt like crap for 6 months, or I felt like crap for 2 years, right? They're very clear. So then you start to think, because sometimes when we're rushed as doctors, we're like, well, I don't know. Maybe you're just tired, right? Yeah. Maybe you're more stressed. Maybe you're not sleeping as well. But nobody really has time to get into that. But when you really start to get into it, sometimes it's multifactorial, right? Sometimes maybe lifestyle has changed, stressors have changed, maybe labs have just changed, right? There's lots of different components to it. So that's where, all of that factors in. But really then they have a plan in place, they do their job. And then we'll typically follow up if we need to do repeat labs 2-3 months later or whatever. And then they will, sometimes have some amount of follow-up with me periodically. And then ideally the goal is to really get people on a once a year or twice a year track. Right. Where they're not seeing me every, an hour every 2 months. Really the idea is that we're trying to get them to a place where then they're thriving on their own. Right. But initially up front, that can take a little bit of time and work.
And that is okay.
Well, I mean, it's worth it because one size definitely does not fit all. Yeah. But in the medical profession, unfortunately, I think a lot of times the doctors are like, yeah, I've seen 100 patients, your same symptoms. This is what they did. This is what helped them. So this is what I'm going to give you. Yeah.
So it's so refreshing, though, to hear that approach because, and you mentioned cookie cutter. Yeah. Our industry's the same way. Yeah. Lawyers, if they want to go get a divorce, they go to a cookie cutter lawyer. And it's just, oh, well, yeah, you fit in this box. Go get a divorce. Here's what we're going to do. We'll file this paperwork. No, listen to them. And that's one of the things that her and I,
than that.
Right. And that's what her and I strive on. And with her and her estate planning and asset protection, and even on the probate side, take the time to listen to the client, dissect it a little bit more. It's not just a cookie cutter.
What I think sometimes listening is so underrated.
Yes.
It is. I think just in our society, there's a little bit of a feeling and a tendency to do. Right? We constantly want to do something. If you have a problem, we want to fix it. But yes, the goal is to fix it. But sometimes if you actually listen and you pay attention, you can fix it better. Right? If you actually take the time to listen on the front end. So I agree with you. I think that's really what I think I can now do much better. And what I think, frankly, I didn't have enough time to do well before. Right. Is listen.
Okay, right. So, all right. So, do you take major medical policies, or
so we are concierge only.
Concierge only. Okay.
Unfortunately, insurance is not going to cover you sitting with your doctor for an hour. Period.
Okay.
Now, some patients can get a super bill and try to get it reimbursed with insurance.
Right.
It's super hit or miss.
The codes, right? You give them the diagnosis codes.
Some people do. A lot don't. They also make it a pain to do that. All labs and pap smears and all of those routine things can be run through insurance.
Okay.
Right. So all of your labs and if you need to go get a mammogram or you need an ultrasound or you need an MRI, all of those things are run through insurance like normal.
Okay.
The only thing and if we need to refer you to an insurance provider for something else, we will. But the only thing that's not is the visit with me.
Okay.
And that's mainly because of the time.
Okay, so you mentioned that y'all draw labs in-house?
Yes, in the office.
Okay, so you're not sending folks out to a lab, to a Quest, to a here, go here and get your labs done?
We send to but we draw in the office and then send it to the lab.
Right, okay.
But it doesn't matter to the patient because it's just getting done quick in the office.
Okay, well, I mean, that's helpful to know because some doctors here, you need to take this and go across the street and
my goal was to make it easier.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's
so
amazing.
my goal was to, you come see me, you have labs drawn in one place, you're sort of getting a plan. Right. So even if people need supplements or things like that, I try to make it as easy as possible. Either we have it in the office, it'll get delivered to you, something that requires less work.
Okay.
Because I think going back to time, that's what we all don't have enough of.
Exactly.
We were actually talking about this earlier, but I think time is often our biggest commodity.
Yeah.
And so if you can just make taking care of yourself easier for someone,
Right.
they're a little more likely to do it. So that's my goal, is to just make that easier. And I wish insurance would cover that approach, but
No, they
so
don't.
far they don't.
Right. So what do you charge hourly?
So the initial hour, we kind of have two models. Basically, a typical hour visit is $4.95.
Okay.
So most people will have that initial $4.95 and a follow-up $4.95 typically.
Okay. All right.
And then after that, we do shorter visits, right? So usually it's a 15-minute or a 30-minute visit, which are priced much lower, like somewhere between 100 and 200.
Right.
Right. They're much lower. And then typically you're not seeing me that often over time.
Right.
It's kind of spaced out. And we also have while we're talking about price, we also have a concierge model that's $39.95, right? So about almost $4,000.
Okay.
That includes
Wait, so $39.95 a month?
a year.
Oh,
$3,000.
$4,000. Yeah.
I thought we were doing monthly here.
$39. That's a real
$39.95 a
discount.
month.
Yeah. Bargain bin discount.
Okay.
I couldn't keep the lights on.
Right.
No, a year.
Okay,
Right.
so
So
you pay-
basically about a $4,000 concierge model per year.
Okay.
And then that includes those 2-hour consults.
Right.
And then any drop in, and basically we function as our primary care.
Okay.
Right. So it's kind of
fantastic.
So that includes like all their drop-in visits, sick visits, follow-ups with me.
Okay.
And then they get like 20% off all ancillary procedures, because we do IVs, we do aesthetics like cosmetics, like Botox
Right.
fillers. We do a lot of vaginal rejuvenation and things like that.
Okay.
Hair restoration. So it includes all of that. So they get a discount on top of that.
interesting.
So
Okay.
we sort of have both options, because
Right.
I found that some people need more.
Yeah.
Right. And some people don't, right? Some
Right.
people might need those 2 visits to just be like, what else do I need to do to really age gracefully? And then they are on their way, right? They are good for a year until maybe they need their pap smear, and that's all
Right.
they need. But others maybe want access. They really want someone to sort of function as their primary care. And they want somewhere to sort of drop in if they need things. And also they get a discount on some of the other services, right? So for some people that makes sense.
That is
So
great.
we sort of
Okay.
have both models, because I think having that access to your physician is important.
Right.
And it also allows me to kind of function as that primary care component for them too. So they're sort of killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Of course.
Because they're getting their GYN and primary care.
Okay. So when they come in and make an appointment, it is with you. It's not a PA or an MA.
They will always see me.
Right. Okay.
For everything. We do have like a primary care nurse practitioner.
Okay.
That she mainly helps with like sick visits. So if someone
it.
like calls, because my schedule's booked out. Of
course.
Right. So if someone calls, that day and they're like, I think I have the flu. Right. She'll do you a quick flu swab, take care of you if someone thinks they have a UTI.
Right.
So really we've added that convenience to have, it's really more of a convenience to the patient.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
They're not
Okay.
waiting on me. They're getting quicker service.
Right.
And so it just allows for a lot of those sick things. And then she really fills in the void too with the primary care.
Right.
Because while I
Okay.
have a lot of primary care experience, which is what functional medicine is, I also really wanted to sort of be able to round out the primary care offering.
Right.
So she can really get into that nitty gritty too.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other doctors with you in the practice, or it's
No,
just you?
It's just
It's
me.
just you.
Oh,
Okay.
I've thought it through, and I just haven't figured it out.
Right.
And I think, we would just have to change the model a little bit. And so
Right.
we may eventually do that. But right now, and I really didn't want to make it this huge commercialized operation. Really why I started it was I wanted that close-knit relationship with my patient.
Right.
And so as you add providers and, it changes that game. I can't speak for the future, but that's not my intention.
Right. And that's what Lori and I have done. We've kept Dad instilled in us.
At
let's
least
keep
kept the crux
Right.
where it
Yes.
is, right?
boutique firm.
Supportive staff can
personal
help
service.
to make sure that service
Correct.
stays where it should be.
Right. Right.
But, in terms of providers, I think, like my nurse practitioner and things like that really help to keep the service quality high. But in terms of physicians, we'll see.
Okay.
TBD.
Got it. Okay.
All right, so the episode is called Raising the Bar. So I know how I would answer it for you, but in your personal life or professional life, how have you raised the bar?
I think I'm working on figuring that out daily. When I really know, I'll report back. But I think for me, it's about, people always use that phrase like being a lifelong learner. And I think when I went back and got board certified in functional medicine, I was actually pregnant. I had my third child 2 months after I opened the practice.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that's where my mom was like, I don't know about your timing
Right.
with this. Because I literally opened the practice. We opened in 2023, and I opened when I was probably 6 or 7 months pregnant. Oh, wow.
Wow.
So, when someone thinks about opening a business, that timing doesn't seem the most logical. But I felt like it's sort of now or never, right? Postpartum's never going to be there's never a great time. I just
Right.
need to do this. But when I went back and, was relearning all of this functional medicine information, I thought, I'm like, not to sound callous, but I was like, I'm a doctor. Like, I feel like I've trained for a long time. I'm going to know a lot of this. This is going to be fine, right? I can knock this out in a month. And boy, was I wrong, right? First of all, I was like, wow, I knew there was so much I didn't know. But sometimes even from a women's health and a hormone management standpoint, I was almost blown away by how much I didn't know. And so I think for me, that education piece, it was humbling to remind myself of how much I didn't know,
Right.
and how much medicine had even evolved in the 10 plus years since I had trained. And so I think for me, that was a really good experience. I'm glad that I did that, because I may have just kept going through my practice. It was easy. I was just, I knew what I knew.
Right.
And I was, updating literature and reading the studies and all of those things. It wasn't like I was out of date, but I wasn't just studying 8 hours a day. Right. And basically I quit my practice, and I spent 3 months studying for my functional medicine boards. And I mean, all day, it was a job. Like, I was literally studying 8 to 5 like a job. But I never thought that there would be that much. I thought, I'll probably need a month. But it took me 3 solid months of working like a job to really learn what I needed to learn. So to raise the bar, I think it's about being a lifelong learner. I think in any field where you're trying to not teach, right, but really trying to listen and then sort of help people work through things or achieve a higher goal, or, help them achieve whatever it is that they're looking to achieve. I think it's about constantly learning and not being satisfied with the status quo. So I am working to be a lifelong learner.
Okay. That's
So
great.
I love that. And I mean, you've in a very young life, you have done so much.
Does it feel so young anymore?
So what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Oh, that's hard.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. There's so many things.
There are.
I feel like it's a long list. Maybe that's the problem. The list is too long. But I would say is to do what you want to do, which seems simple, but I think when you're young, there's a little bit of fear in that, you sort of, at least in medicine, it's all very laid out for you, right? You go to college, then you go to medical school, then you have to get a residency and train for 4 to 5 years, and they tell you what to do, right? You show up at work at 6 a.m., you work a 24-hour shift. These are the duties, and it's all very prescribed. And so I think during that journey for me, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to think outside the box, right? Because medicine is very cut and dry, right? It's black and white. You are following formulas, you are reading data. It is very 2 + 2 = 4. And so I think the first time I really thought outside the box it was when I thought about and started Feminology MD, because it wasn't following a formula. I didn't take a job. I wasn't told, it was just I had to figure it out. And for me, I think the fear around it was just, where do I start? Right? It's running a business, but also just, where do I start? But I did it. And so I think what I would tell myself earlier is, maybe looking back, I would have done it earlier.
Oh, right.
Right?
There
I
you
would
go.
have done
Okay.
it younger. I loved what I did, and I actually think I gained a lot of experience, and it helped me to shape the practice that I've created now. But I would say just to be fearless, right? And if you have an idea, don't feel like you can't do it. Instead, educate yourself, right? Take the time to learn and to do it correctly.
Right.
Right? And then there's no time like the present, right? There's always this feeling of like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do that later.
You do. You
That
put it
next
off.
year will be a better time for me. But actually, you never know when you won't have a next year.
That's right.
Truly, right? So do it while you can.
Right.
I love that.
Okay.
I
That
love
is cool.
that. Well, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for
Okay, wait.
joining
Fun,
us.
guys.
Wait, hold on. I still have
Oh,
a couple
we're
more,
not
just a
done?
couple
Oh,
more
my
questions.
God.
I know we're on a time crunch here. Okay, regenerative medicine.
Yes. Okay.
So when I hear that, I think you think stem cell, you think exosomes, you think all those kinds of things, right? Is
Yeah.
that what that is? And is that what you do?
Yes and no. So it's confusing, I think, not confusing, but it's just such a broad term.
Right.
Right? Which is ironic because we're talking a lot about broad terms in general in medicine. And so I think there's a lot of these umbrella terms and buzzwords out there today. Anti-aging, right?
Right.
What does that even mean? Like what does an anti-aging clinic do, right? Like, are they like putting people in, like, what are they doing?
Right.
Right? Are there robots? Like, what's happening?
Well, and there's med spas opening up on every corner. And I
That's
think-
anti-aging.
Right.
You know,
and I
like,
think
what does
one
that
is-
mean?
they're
Like, are they
called
just
med spas.
injecting you with Botox and they're
Correct.
calling that anti-aging because now you don't have wrinkles?
That's right.
Like, what
That's
does that
right.
mean? And so I think regenerative medicine is a little bit of the same.
Okay.
My takeaway from what it really is, right, is what can you do, whether that be supplements, whether that be medicine, whether that be IV medications, whether that be peptide therapy,
Okay.
whether that be eating, diet and lifestyle changes, sleep habits, putting it all together and figuring out how to slow cellular aging, right,
Okay.
which is ultimately slows the aging process. Because as we age, what happens, right? Our cells age. It's not rocket science.
Right.
And so it's the idea about shifting chronological age versus numerical age, right? So if you can do things to lower inflammation in the body, increase antioxidant levels, right? Then ideally you will have slower cellular aging. And so that is what all of these things are ultimately trying to do,
Okay.
right? Is to regenerate our youth.
But in a natural way, or is it okay?
So stem cells, I don't do stem cell therapy.
Right.
It is very much, I think, still being researched.
It's new, correct.
Yeah, and so
Correct.
I definitely incorporate things that are still being researched because
Got it.
science is slow.
Yes. of
Right?
course.
And to go from sort of preliminary research where there's, it's data driven to actually being ingrained into traditional medicine takes a very long time.
Right.
It is a very slow process.
Right.
So we, even things like PRP, like platelet-rich plasma,
That's
that
right.
people
I've
use
heard
for
that.
injections and for, our faces and hair restoration. All of these things are not technically FDA approved
Right.
for those things, right? Because that takes a long time. But also, most things that get FDA approved have large volumes of pharmaceutical money behind it.
That's correct.
To get them FDA approved, right?
Yes.
So these things are not created by large companies, so no one's going to fund that, right? So they will just stay where they are because
Right.
it is what it is.
Right.
But I think stem cells is a little bit more regenerative, right? And I think it's a little more prevalent in some other countries.
Correct. People-
where you'll hear
that's right.
people going. The data is still mixed
Okay.
on whether there's real value. You will hear people some that say it really made a difference, and others that notice no difference.
Right.
I'm a little
Okay.
more cautious with stem cells because there's a little more potential for adverse effects, right?
Right.
And there's my feeling on some of the newer therapies is if there's very little very little potential for harm
Right.
from everything that we know, maybe it's okay to try.
Right. Okay.
But if we really don't know and there's more potential for harm, then I counsel my patients, right? And I let that be something that they think about and make a decision on.
Right.
But I'm a little more apprehensive about those things because I feel like if we don't know that it's good, but we also don't know that it's bad,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel good about that.
Right. Okay. That makes
and
sense.
I'm at the end of the day, right? As doctors, we take an oath, right? Do no harm.
That's right.
And so if I don't feel really good that I know this isn't going to do harm, it might not be worth it.
Right. Okay. All right.
So-
Okay. So you mentioned something about you help with better sleep habits, right?
Part of all of it, yeah.
Okay. So my biggest issue is I can't find a pillow worth a darn. I've been through 27 pillows. No joke.
And that is no lie.
I probably spent $4,000 on
I
pillows.
need to do some pillow research. I might need to get back to you.
Oh my
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
If you find me a pillow that works and I can have a good night's
what
sleep,
happens?
I just can't get comfortable. I can't sleep. My head doesn't get. Are we still on?
We are.
Okay.
We are.
I just can't get comfortable.
Here's what I'm going to say. We were younger, and we were in San Antonio. That's where my mother's family is from. We were at my aunt's house. We were, he was on one end of the house. I was on the other end of the house. I am sound asleep. I wake up, and he is, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Give me your pillow.
I forgot about that.
Lifelong issue.
That's exactly right.
Maybe you need a new mattress.
Oh, he's
That-
tried that too.
I've tried that too.
Nothing.
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 I'm miserable. I've tried Sleep Number. I've tried this. One's the
Have you
space
tried an 8
astronauts use. A what?
8 sleep? People like their
I
8
haven't.
sleeps.
I've heard of that. No, I haven't
I
tried
haven't.
8
I don't
sleep.
personally have one, but I hear good things.
People have talked about purple. People have talked about anyway. We could talk about
We'll
this
report
later,
back.
but just a pillow. So yes, I
Oh yeah,
bothered
no,
you.
he's
Went through
like,
the whole
"Give me-
closet of pillows.
Give me your pillow. Mine's not comfortable." And I'm like, "Here's the damn pillow. Let me. I mean, I was asleep.
Did I end up taking it, or did I give it back to you?
No,
I took
you
it.
took it.
That was a good pillow, I guess. I don't know.
He was
Should've-
desperate.
Should have brought it home with me. I do get it. Yeah, it gets to the point where I'm desperate.
Oh no, yeah, his pillow has its own suitcase.
No, it's a situation.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah,
it
she's
is a
thinking
situation.
he has other health issues. Hold on a minute.
He's like, okay, yeah, we'll be scheduling an
Yeah,
appointment.
you need to
Like,
come see
that's the
me.
whole thing. Okay.
You need to pay for the year now
Now.
for the whole thing, and you're still limited.
Oh boy.
Oh, that's so
That's
funny.
hilarious.
And it was actually the funniest. My office manager one day was like, "How do I kindly suggest to people that it might be best for them to get? They might be a concierge membership candidate without implying that they." I was like, "Well, you could just say that might end up being a better deal for you."
Right, financially.
Like, I don't know how to. Yeah, I
Make
don't
a
know
smart-
if there's a right
That's
way.
all. There's not a right
Make a
way,
smart
but I like
decision.
that
I don't know
way.
how
I
you-
like that way.
How you do that.
Oh my
Okay,
God,
great.
you are too
Okay.
funny.
All right, so go ahead.
I mean, that's all I got.
All right, we're going to end on that.
Oh my God.
All right. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us.
So
This was
fun.
so much
Thank
fun.
you, guys.
We'd love to have you back.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
there are so many other questions I want to ask, but I know that we're on a time constraint. And I don't want to
Yes.
keep you all afternoon. So yes, I appreciate you coming and
Thank you.
spending
It
the
was
time
so
with
much
us today.
fun.
This was great.
It was.
This was great. Next time it'll be in the evening. We'll raise the bar in a different way.
And right, there's nothing wrong with a glass of wine, and I understand it's healthy
It is.
in some instances.
We'll go with
In
that.
moderation.
In moderation.
We'll go with that.
I do like some wine, so we'll go with that.
All right. So thank y'all for tuning in and looking forward to y'all watching this podcast, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks to our sponsor, the Ashmore Law Firm.
We specialize in probate, estate planning, family law, guardianship, personal injury, and civil litigation.
You can find us at ashmorelaw.com.
Or by calling us at 214-559-7202.
Again, that's ashmorelaw.com.
Or calling 214-559-7202.